Commencing roll call now. Councilmember Juan Carlos Prado. Councilmember Beatriz Cerrillo.
Present.
Councilmember Everardo Rodriguez.
Present.
Councilmember Jennifer Ruiz. Councilmember Blair Whitney.
Here.
Councilmember Gabriela Ake. Councilmember Celali Corencita. And Chair Brock-Sesser.
Present.
Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2 is public comment. Anyone may speak for up to 2 minutes on any topic not on the agenda. Please note the council may not discuss or take actions on items not on the agenda. Do we have any public comment this evening?
During this time, members of the public can comment on any topic that is not on the agenda. For those attending the meeting on a Zoom video conference, we will use the raise hand feature to organize any public comment. When you hear your name called, we'll send you a request to mute your mic and you may begin speaking. I do not see any public comment.
Thank you very much, Diana. Next agenda item is a presentation on the North Fair Oaks Economic Advancement Center. That's to take 30 minutes. On the agenda, that presentation is being made by Peggy Jensen. I do not see Peggy in the room. Do we have someone who is covering for Peggy this evening?
Good evening, council members. Justin Mates, Deputy County Executive. I believe Peggy is going to join shortly. Let me just see if I can get her on the right Zoom link here.
Thank you.
Just a technical issue. Peggy should be joining us in just a moment.
Sounds good. Thank you, Justin.
I believe Peggy is on the call now.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Are our colleagues also on? Do they have the Teams link rather than the Zoom link? Are Erica, Karen, and Ernesto on the call?
Let me check.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, we're here.
Okay, great. All right. So are we ready to start with this item?
We are ready, Peggy. Floor
Okay,
is yours.
Thank you very much, Brooke. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Peggy Jensen. I'm the assistant to the county executive, the assistant county executive, and I'm here today with my colleague from South San Francisco, Ernesto Lucero, and Karen Decker from Half Moon Bay, and Erica Wood, who is a consultant on the Coastside Economic Recovery Committee. And we're here today to talk to you about some work that's being done in San Mateo County and propose to you a concept for your consideration around a North Fair Oaks Economic and Community Center. Next slide, please. Okay, so for our agenda this evening, I'd like to start out by reviewing with you the recent support that the county and other philanthropic organizations have provided for North Fair Oaks small businesses, just to give you a little bit of a background and an update. And then we'd like to dive into the Community Economic Advancement Center concept. Ernesto will first talk about the program that's been operating in South San Francisco for a little over a year. Then Karen and Erica will talk about the Coastside Center planning process and concept. And then finally, I'll wrap up with an overview of the North Fair Oaks Business and Family Center feasibility study that was done in late 2021, the results of that study. We'll pause then for any questions that the council members may have, and then turn to a discussion to get your thoughts and receive your direction on next steps for this concept. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of the support the small business has received since the start of the pandemic over the last 2 years, there have been multiple grant programs. Some of those programs were open to any small business. Some were focused on just assisting restaurants, breweries, and wineries. We also had a micro food business effort, which supported food trucks, small businesses, people who were making food in their homes, and also people who were applying for home kitchen permits. During that period of time, over 93 businesses in North Fair Oaks have been assisted, and the total amount that has been distributed in grants is over $700,000. I'd like to point out that that represents almost 5% of the total grant dollars that have been distributed by the county to small businesses during the pandemic. And North Fair Oaks represents about 1.5% of the total county population. So in terms of population, North Fair Oaks has gotten a fair share, even a little more than a fair share of those funds. In addition to those grants for small businesses, the Board of Supervisors set aside funding to essentially cover the cost of environmental health permits for all small businesses during 21-22. And that represented another contribution of over $550,000 to North Fair Oaks businesses. Next slide, please. So in terms of ongoing program right now, actually this program started about a month and a half ago, which the board approved $5,000 grants for up to 100 small businesses in North Fair Oaks. And the criteria were that the business had to be located in North Fair Oaks. They had to attest to some impact, some pandemic impact. And those were pretty much the criteria. It was a pretty simple process to ensure that we were reaching out to the businesses that along the Middlefield corridor and Fifth Avenue area. Our Office of Community Affairs partners went door to door to over 100 businesses, reaching out, telling them about the program, helping them apply before any public announcement of the program was made. To date, over 80 applications have been received, and those applications could have been completed in English and Spanish or in Chinese. We also provided a hotline where people who had questions about the grant program could call in. That's the hotline. We had 3 different numbers, one for people calling in English, one for people who wanted to speak to someone in Chinese, and another hotline staffed by Spanish speakers. Of those 80 applications, we deemed that 53 were eligible. The ones that weren't eligible were mostly non-North Fair Oaks businesses. They didn't reside in the area. And as of July 8th, 47 grants of $10,000 had been distributed to small businesses in North Fair Oaks. The quote at the bottom of the screen I was considering closing my beauty salon after 10 years of operation on Middlefield Road, but the grant will allow me to stay open. That quote is from one of the grant recipients. She said she was extremely grateful to have the opportunity to get this type of assistance. Next slide, please. So with that, let me pause here for a moment. Any questions about the support that has been the county and other partners have provided to North Fork's businesses over the last 2 years? I don't see any hands. Brooks, is there anything I'm missing?
No, absolutely nothing, Peggy. I just
Okay.
wanted to point out, I was so pleased to see the uptake on the recent grant program and how many applications were submitted in a relatively short period of time. The outreach work done by OCA was terrific in that case.
Yeah, it was really impressive. It was a great partnership. Okay. Oh, Everett?
Yeah, you might have said this, but I didn't hear. And I meant to ask if the grants were alone. Are those grants in any way? Do they need to be repaid or
No, it's not
Okay.
alone. It's a
Oh,
grant.
okay, great.
It's a grant. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank
there's no repayment required. None of the grants that the county has given out throughout the pandemic there was no repayment ever required. None of them were loans.
Okay.
So they were all grants
Great,
to
thank you.
support small businesses.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Not seeing any more questions. I'll turn it over to Ernesto, who will talk to you about the South San Francisco Economic Advancement Center.
Thank you, Peggy. Good evening. My name is Ernesto Lucero. I'm the acting deputy director with the City of South San Francisco's Economic and Community Development Department. So we created the Economic Advancement Center, or the Centro de Avance Económico in South San Francisco. This was in response to a growing need to support our unemployed and underemployed residents and struggling small businesses and entrepreneurs as well recover from the economic pressures from the pandemic. As the City of South San Francisco, along with our partners like San Mateo County, we pushed out several COVID relief programs over the past several years, and we learned a couple really important things, mostly that many people were not online, and so they were missing a lot of the important webinars that we were pushing out, or many didn't have the ability to apply for online resources or programs, applications that we were also distributing online. Many did not speak English as their preferred language, and so with that, we thought we needed to create a brick and mortar one-stop shop with resources and services that can meet a lot of the needs of South San Francisco and North San Mateo County. Next slide, please. So with that, we have identified that we needed a space to support small businesses, entrepreneurs, as well as job seekers. At the height of the pandemic, we had one of the highest unemployment rates in San Mateo County at that time. And we wanted a very central physical location that the community could easily access. And this was along our downtown corridor, Grand Avenue. This was in a vacant bank building, and we engaged the property owner for this potential use because it sat vacant for probably almost 2 years. And as the city negotiated the lease and did some tenant improvements during 2021, we didn't want to wait for those services to be delivered. So we started the virtual program beginning in July 2021, last summer. And then the space officially opened in February of this year with a ribbon cutting. So the current providers in the space are Renaissance Entrepreneurship Center, and they are assisting small businesses and entrepreneurs. And then we have Job Train on the workforce development side. We also have YMCA in the space once a week, and they're administering the city's emergency rental assistance program for those affected by housing insecurity. Next slide, please. So through this partnership with San Mateo County, we were able to expand the small business support services to not only South San Francisco, but also other communities in North San Mateo County, which you see here. So Colma, Daly City, Millbrae, Pacifica, San Bruno, and Brisbane. And these services are in the process of getting expanded to North San Mateo County as well on the workforce development side with Job Train. Some of the core services that are being offered at the Economic Advancement Center, you'll see here, a lot of walk-in assistance for rapid employment placement. So getting people an immediate job, getting assistance with resume building, boot camps for startup businesses, a lot of resource referrals, grant program administration. We have bilingual staff there. So a lot of great programs that are currently being offered. And this is a fluid program where we're able to add in new components based on the demand. Next slide, please. So both of the organizations that I mentioned, they're providing services with the goal of reaching 100 clients per organization per year. However, due to the high demand, we're anticipating that more will be served than the 100 per year. Excuse me. Job Train's primarily assisting this first year, like I mentioned, with rapid job placement services just to get people back to work. Their wraparound services consist of career advising, resume development, like I mentioned, and resources on occupational training. And last quarter, 36 of those clients gained new employment after services, making an average wage of $23 an hour. And 70% of those individuals have landed full-time positions. So pretty effective. In addition, Job Train's also providing or as already provided 2 Teamsters transportation, distribution, and logistics programs, training programs, the TDL program. And this is through a larger regional consortium with the West Oakland Job Center. And then Renaissance on the small business side has been developing some really popular programs for Spanish-speaking population. Comida y Comunidad is one of them. This is a multi-week training program to help businesses just get set up and started. And it's really provided a great venue for networking with other Spanish-speaking startups. Also, Renaissance has created a women's empowerment program, and they've also been administering the California Micro Business COVID-19 relief grant to our most vulnerable micro businesses. Last quarter, they provided over 34 classes and workshops, and these were all held at the Economic Advancement Center. And we see this continuing to grow with the presence in South San Francisco, and most importantly, they really built a trust with the business community. So it's been a really great win. Next slide, please. And this is just a slide specifically on Renaissance, but they have a series of classes, workshops, and events. It's all online, rencenter.org/calendar. And this is just one of their upcoming start and grow your business orientations on August 3rd. And then we have all the information linked on our site, our city website, ssf.net/EAC. And happy to answer any questions, and I'll turn it over to Peggy.
Any questions for Ernesto on the program, the very successful program they've put in place, he and his team in South City? Okay. Well, why don't we go on to the next slide then? So because of the tremendous success in South San Francisco, I should add that the county put forward $200,000 at the very beginning of the effort that South City made into setting up the Economic Advancement Center. And our request, our funding went toward support for Renaissance. And instead of having the small business component just focus on South City business owners, our money allowed them to expand and serve all of the north part of the county. But we've been a partner. We've worked with them along the way, and we were so impressed with the results that we came back and talked about taking this same model and replicating it in other places of the county, particularly areas where we have a high concentration of unincorporated area residents. And what you'll see is that we went back and in concept asked the board to allocate $2.5 million for a similar center in North Fair Oaks and also one on the coast side. The board hasn't officially approved those funds, but that concept has been presented to them and also shared with the supervisors who oversee both of those districts. The $2.5 million amount was selected because that's consistent with the budget that the South City program needed to operate for 2 years. So we expect that this funding would, if this is something that North Fair Oaks is interested in, we would expect this funding to cover 2 years of operation. But future funding would be dependent on some sort of combination of federal and state grants, which South San Francisco has been very successful in obtaining. I know philanthropy is interested in this. I've been talking with CZI and also with the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. And there might possibly be county funds depending upon what our financial situation is. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Karen Decker and Erica Wood, and they're going to talk to you about the work that they've started on the coast side around planning a center for that part of our community. So Karen and Erica.
Great, thank you so much, Peggy. And good evening, Chair Brooks and council and community. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. As Peggy mentioned, my name is Karen Decker and I'm the Community and Economic Vitality Manager for the City of Half Moon Bay. And I'm joined here tonight by the city's Economic Development Consultant, Erica Wood. Next slide, please. And I can just open by saying that the coast side has been working on a local recovery initiative for the last, I would say, 15 months or so. And that effort has informed a lot of our thinking about what an economic center could look like on the coast side. And so we hope that some of our thought processes will provoke ideas around what makes most sense for your community here in North Fair Oaks. And we really look forward to collaborating and sharing learnings with both North Fair Oaks and South San Francisco moving forward. Next slide, please. So I'm the project manager for the Coastside Recovery Initiative, and that initiative from its inception has had two very specific goals. They are really the aspiration for this work. The first is that we want to help businesses recover from COVID, and in order to do that, we needed a clear understanding of what businesses were going through. Regarding the second bullet, I'd like to elaborate on what we mean by equitable, because I know that term is used a lot. On an individual and family level, we know that COVID plunged those who are already vulnerable into crisis mode. And so meanwhile, this is against the backdrop of a regional cost of living, which is nearly 80% higher than the US average. And I know all of our communities in the Bay Area struggle with this, with affordable housing. And so we reconciled ourselves to the fact that if we ever hope to be a vibrant and resilient coastside economy that is well prepared for the shocks that we know are inevitable, we also need to ensure that we have an economy that works for everyone. Next slide, please. So this slide represents a year-long planning process. It was community-driven, which you can see from our open house, which kicked off our effort, and it was attended by nearly 200 coastsiders. You also see community engagement in action in the composition of a local task force made up of 17 people. We looked at multiple sources of data like key informant interviews and focus groups, county survey results. All of this culminated into a set of 15 recommendations. And one of those recommendations was to develop a small business assistance center. So you can imagine our excitement when we learned of the $2.5 million recommendation from the county that Peggy just mentioned towards centers on the coast side and North Fair Oaks. And another recommendation that we see very much related and in line with that dream is to create an incubator for startups and early stage entrepreneurs. And yet a third recommendation that we also see very closely related to this work called for an increase in vocational pathways and higher education on the coast. Currently, students on the coast side, really they have to remote in and take classes online, or they have to commute, as we say, over the hill or up north to San Francisco. There's really no physical site on the coast side for any kind of higher education to date. Next slide, please. So this is our task force. I mentioned this initiative was developed in close collaboration with our local Chamber of Commerce and with county leadership. And so you see that represented in the Executive Oversight Committee, who really shepherded this process throughout. And our task force is very diverse. Everybody on the task force either lives on the coast, works on the coast, or both. And so we saw this effort as very complementary to other regional efforts, the county in their own right leading a very successful recovery initiative, as well as the governor. We know the pandemic devastated tourism and hospitality and restaurants and small businesses. And because of our unique location on the coast, those happen to be the very industries that make up our coastside economy, or the vast majority of it. And so we were heavily impacted by the pandemic, and we were really intentional in making sure that those sectors had a seat at the table. At this stage, we're actually done with our planning process. We moved into implementation. So the task force, which had over 20 convenings, really fulfilled their commitment. And I'm so proud to have worked alongside them. They did a tremendous job. And their expertise continues to shape the work. So I mentioned some of the industries that we have represented. We have venture capital, and we have a venture capitalist who's helping us think through an earned income strategy for the economic center. We have commercial real estate represented. And so we're tapping into that expertise as we think through different leasing options, for example. Next slide, please. So at this point, I'd like to bring in Erica, who's going to walk us through some structure and program elements for the next 2 or 3 slides, and then we'll go ahead and open it up for questions for the co-side.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say good evening to everyone. I'm really pleased to be with you all this evening and to have an opportunity to talk about some of the great work that's happening on the coast side. So for us, a first step in thinking about what a center could be was to figure out who's gonna do the work and how are we gonna structure it. We're happy that the city of Half Moon Bay has taken on the responsibility of playing our lead agency role, which is terrific. And it's not by accident. One of the important efforts that emanated from the Coastside Recovery Initiative planning work that Karen talked about was the need to really develop economic capacity writ large within the region and for the city in particular. So one of the things that has happened as a result has been to create this new community and economic vitality division within the city, which we're really happy about. And that's very atypical, frankly, for a city of Half Moon Bay's size. We know we will need the help of regional partners like the county, and I will just echo Karen's excitement about being able to collaborate and work alongside and learn from the efforts that are happening in South San Francisco and hopefully North Fair Oaks. Local advisors are going to be critically important to help keep us honest and make sure we're meeting the needs at a community level. And then really importantly, we want to think about sustainability at the beginning and not as we're down the road with our efforts. And specifically thinking about how we can add an earned income strategy into our design. And that would look like people who take advantage of some of the services, paying a fee, leasing working spaces, which is becoming more and more popular these days. So we see potential for some revenue in the design that we're putting together. So then after thinking about roles and structure, next slide, we turn our attention to space and infrastructure. We know we will need a physical space. We were very inspired after a site visit to see what was happening in South San Francisco and hear from Ernesto and the team there. We have a couple of commercial vacancies that are about 4,000 square feet. We think that will be ideally suited to meet our needs. And we know that tenant improvements are going to be part of the process. And we could look at that as a challenge, or we could look at that as an opportunity to engage local philanthropists and donors and other co-investors to support this work. And then some of the details around leasing logistics, who will hold the lease, what will the terms be, and in all likelihood, the city of Half Moon Bay will step in to take on that leasing responsibility for us. And then next slide, the really exciting and fun part is to think about what we'll offer in terms of services to benefit our community and our residents. We know that we will need support for small businesses, for workers, and for job seekers. But we also know we're going to want to support our entrepreneurs with their new business ideas and see that as leading to new job opportunities on the coast side, which is sorely, sorely needed. So we're excited about this idea of a business incubator as being part of our offerings. And fortunately for us, we had a very exciting federal grant opportunity that we applied for. We weren't successful. However, we did a lot of work to think about what an incubator could look like. And it's not a new strategy by any means, but we think there's a real opportunity to make a unique coastside incubator that harnesses our region's unique assets and opportunity industries. We also want to make sure that we're leveraging existing work, and that's that third bullet that you see. Our chamber has some exciting efforts underway. One of our nonprofits has some exciting efforts underway. So we want to see how we can really build on that and integrate it into our offerings. Other support services that we know are going to be critical include things like childcare. We want to make sure we're meeting the needs of the whole person. So if they need help accessing public benefits or other resources, as Ernesto said, we really want it to be a one-stop shop. And importantly, we want those services to be accessible to our undocumented residents who live in the area. And then finally, there's been a group known as the Coastside Workforce Development Roundtable. This is a group of higher education leaders, K-12 education leaders, adult education, labor, and other community leaders who have really come together to take on the challenge of how do we create pathways to high meaning, high wage, and high demand jobs. We're fortunate to have some labor market studies that we've been able to look at to help inform what those pathways might look like. And we know there are opportunities for upward economic mobility within our health services field, other fields like accounting. That is going to be part of the work that we want to make sure we can support through this center. So I will pause and see if we want to take questions now, Peggy, or if we want to continue on with the other slide.
Any questions for Erica and Karen around the program on the coast side? Okay, I don't see any. I don't have, I can't see everybody on the screen, but if there aren't any questions, I'd be happy to go on. Okay, next slide, please. So I'd like to turn now to give you an overview of the results of the North Fair Oaks Business and Family Center feasibility study. Next slide. So background, this study was requested by Supervisor Warren Slocum, and he put forth his district funding to have Renaissance Entrepreneurship Center collaborate with Generations United to prepare this document. It was completed in early 2022, and it involved data gathering, involved interviews with over 31 different entities, businesses, local leaders, community organizations, and they also surveyed 25 different businesses. High-level findings was that there was strong support for some type of business support center and also family center in North Fair Oaks. Next slide, please. So in terms of the study findings regarding what people were interested in vis-a-vis business and worker services, the high levels of interest were areas with high levels of interest included job training, entrepreneurship training and resources, lots of talk about access to working capital, loans, and grants. Another thing that was mentioned frequently was affordable office space. And then finally, education and training, education around business needs, things. How do you set up a business? How do you develop a marketing plan? How do you develop a business plan? How do you use the tools that you have to increase your reach in marketing? Next slide, please. The supervisor also wanted to look at the need for family-related services, and the study found that there was interest in having better information about available supports and services, navigation type assistance to sign up for and receive available services. There's also suggestions for co-working space for community organizations, and finally the desire to have more community meeting spaces. Next slide, please. So that's the summary of the South City Center, the Half Moon Bay program, and the high-level review of what we've initially heard the community, the North Fair Oaks community might be interested in terms of business support services and potentially some additional services for families. If there are no questions for all of us at this point, I'll go on to the next slide.
Let's go ahead, Peggy.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ever had his hand raised.
Okay.
Go ahead, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Sounds really interesting and positive. Appreciate the efforts to support the businesses. Got a couple of quick questions. One is, would this program be geared for relatively small family-owned businesses, or would any type of business qualify? And also countywide, I suppose, not necessarily only from North Fair Oaks.
So I think that the program can be designed to serve whoever the community feels like needs to be served. But maybe I'll turn to Ernesto and to Karen and Erica to talk about how it's working in their communities to give you an example. Would that be of interest to you? Ever?
Yeah.
Okay. Ernesto, do you want to start?
Sure, happy to start. Yes, so our program was designed for all businesses in the city of South San Francisco. And then, like Peggy mentioned, with the contribution with the county, we were able to expand it to businesses in North San Mateo County. It was pretty, with that expansion, we did kind of define it for small businesses because we did understand that those were the ones that needed the services the most. A lot of the larger businesses were able to access resources online, attend our webinars, or get other ways of access to resources. And just since we have been open almost a year, we see the demand as the really small businesses under 10 employees, essentially, and mostly under 5 employees, I would say. So very small.
Karen or Erica?
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in for the co-side. I too imagine mainly support for local small businesses. Just the aesthetic, the feel, the environment, the real estate options in Half Moon Bay don't really lend to big box stores or, really large factories or Amazon warehouse type spaces. I will say that this will be open to businesses along the coast side, not just within the city limit of Half Moon Bay. I'm so proud to offer that. We are also a bit geographically isolated, so happy to open that up to businesses along the coast. And then in terms of that incubator component, one thing that makes the coast side kind of unique is our natural assets that Erica mentioned. So for instance, it's special that we have an airport, we have a harbor, we have a lot of open spaces, we have a lot of agriculture. And so our thinking in terms of marketing this incubator, and particularly towards women and minority-owned entrepreneurs that are looking at startups in these industries, we'd really like to achieve this triple bottom line. So we'd like to attract businesses that are interested in, of course, making a profit, but that have a social ethos that really put people first and the planet. That's kind of the 3 Ps. And I think given our natural assets, that could be a real draw for, say people along the lines of, say, a Moss Landing kind of R&D startup, or, why couldn't the coast side be a model for regenerative agriculture? So that's been our thinking at this preliminary stage, but we'll continue to ask our local advisors and draw on best practices and really closely watching the great success from Ernesto and his team.
Does that answer your question or give you a sense of what other folks are doing, Ever?
Yes, thank you. And my last question, if I may, is if this program is contemplating within its training and teaching to include information that can turn current businesses into more environmentally friendly businesses that promote reusable items or, less plastic, no styrofoam, that sort of thing.
Absolutely, that could be considered. I don't know whether, I don't know the details about South San Francisco or the coast side plans, but certainly this could be coordinated with the County Green Business Program, our Office of Sustainability. I know a variety of communities have recycling, different fix-it programs. So there are a lot of different things that could be considered. And I think we definitely encourage entrepreneurs who are thinking about environmental sustainability to participate in an incubator or get the support of the resources provided by the center. Ernesto, Erica, Karen, anything you want to add?
Sure. So actually, one of the programs that Renaissance is doing that I mentioned, the Comida y Comunidad, their last meeting, they did have somebody from the county speak about the Green Business Program to promote that. There was a heavy interest in it, and I think the city's space, we also want to become a green business to kind of showcase our efforts to be environmentally friendly, to kind of show as an example. So it's definitely part of our program.
Yeah, and I could jump in there as well. I know that the city is working actively on our CAP, our Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, in close collaboration with the county. I know our city was kind of emerged early on to do a pilot for a foodware ordinance, a sustainable foodware ordinance. And I think that as part of our training and education and curriculum that we offer at the center, that will be helping to onboard businesses, promote the values that our council has adopted. That's just one example off the top of my head.
I would just add to what everyone has said so far and say, to me, economic opportunity and how we support that is not separate and apart from issues around climate and sustainability. In fact, we've really got to be intentional about bringing those efforts together. So Karen mentioned regenerative ag. This is a growing opportunity industry that we see on the coast to do agriculture in more sustainable ways, to sequester carbon. So I really appreciate the question, Councilmember Rodriguez, and look forward to exploring opportunities for how we can do more of this together.
Yeah, so one thought, so two other points just to share. The first is that throughout all of our business grant programs over the past 2 years, we've contracted with an organization called Environmental Innovations to do outreach to people, to business owners whose primary language is Spanish. Environmental Innovations is also our business consultant. So in addition to doing outreach for the grants, they were also certifying and educating businesses on becoming a green business. So it was really kind of a two-for. Many of these people got grants from the county that also were able to become greener, and in many cases reduce their costs by operating more efficiently and more environmentally effectively. Let's see. The other point I was going to make is that I know that South City has partnered with a variety of programs, the Labor Councils program. One of the things that I know that our Office of Sustainability is looking at, I think in collaboration with PCE, is training programs for people to do electrification of houses, because that's a path that we all want to proceed on to address climate change. So I think there are a lot of opportunities there. And I know that whoever becomes the contractor for providing job seeker services would want to connect with all of those opportunities.
Thank you.
Are there questions from other council members? If so, please raise your hand in the room. Okay, I actually have a couple, Peggy.
Sure.
The 2.5 million you're requesting from the board, could you tell me where that would come from? Would that just be general fund, or is it Measure K, or what are we looking at there?
No, it would be American Rescue Act plan money,
okay.
ARPA money,
Okay.
which is one-time money. The county has received a total of about $150 million. This would be carved out of that. The 2-year time frame for the use of the funds is tied to the requirements, the time period within which we have to spend those ARPA funds.
Okay, now.
And the thought would be, yeah. And the thought would be, this would be seed funding, hopefully get this center launched and really established over that 2-year period. So you'd be able to go out and demonstrate to other funders that this really needs to continue. There's significant benefit to the community.
Mm-hmm. And what county department would kind of create and manage the center, or do the contracting for the services that the center provides?
You mean in terms of the county staffing and how that would work?
Yeah.
So the first step is establishing interest in the community, and then we're going to come back and look at how that would be staffed. We know Half Moon Bay has made a significant commitment to this. We also know we have a wonderful staff at the Office of Community Affairs. We would obviously be working closely with them, but the plan would be to bring in somebody to oversee this project, who has expertise and interest in community development.
And I'm putting the cart way before the horse with my third question, but have any ideas been kicked around with regard to where the center might be located?
Well, you know, we've been looking around and we have our real property, our real estate folks have contacted a broker. So we don't have anything perfect yet, but we are in the process of looking.
Okay.
The county manager is, you know, the center in South City is 4,000 square feet. If you have interest in this, I'd highly recommend that you visit. Ernesto's a wonderful tour guide and has great staff. Their facility is beautiful. It's located right downtown on the main street. And ideally, we want this to be something that's central, easily accessible. The other point that I'd make is that we've had some very initial conversations with the credit union. And they're a potential partner in all of this too, as the bank on Middlefield Road.
Well, that's terrific. Okay, before we get to the conclusion part and the action steps, I'd like to offer the opportunity for the public to comment on this. Do we have any public comment, Diana?
During this time, members of the public, if you wish to comment on agenda item number 2, please raise your hand now. I do not see any public comment.
Okay, thank you, Deanna. Let's go ahead, Peggy, with next steps then.
Okay, Diana, if you would, next slide, please. So the reason we're here tonight at your study session is just to get your feedback on this idea. Is this something that you think the council would support? And if so, what role would the council like to play in the planning? It could be anything from forming a subcommittee that works closely with the county staff in terms of developing the planning process, to reviewing a work plan on an ongoing basis, monthly reports, a variety of different ways. But when I shared this concept with Supervisor Slocum and got his okay to come speak with you about it, he was very adamant that this is something that the council needs to be involved in. So that's my question to you all. What are your thoughts about this, and how do you think that what would be reasonable next steps if you think this is something that would be valued in North Fair Oaks?
Okay, well, I'd like to take the pulse of the council to see if I mean, I think I know I hope I know the answer to this question, but whether the council supports the creation of such a center in North Fair Oaks. Ever, I believe we have Blair. I see Ever's hand raised. Yes, go ahead, Ever.
Yeah, this sounds like a wonderful opportunity for to provide support to our family-owned business, and I certainly would be in support of this. I think that something that would be great would be to extend an invitation to some business owners who may want to be part of it, considering that I don't know how many council members, are business owners, but I think that's a minority, if there's any, and it would be important to have some of those business owners be part of the committee, if there's one to be formed, to kind of provide more real business related feedback if that is needed.
Thank you, Ever. Councilmember Whitney. Blair, go ahead.
I just want to say I totally support this, both in concept and just in general. I'm not a business owner, but I aspire to maybe someday be. And I like bringing the resources to where the people are that are trying to find, creative economic ways to be more self-sufficient and grow their incomes, whether it's a family, an individual. There was this tech shop thing that was around for a few years, and there were a bunch of little micro businesses centered around it. People would have like a club membership, some access to equipment. And I've seen folks like in East Palo Alto and East Menlo Park you'd be surprised the innovation and the ideas that people bring forth about, computer aided design, spun carbon bike frames. The guy was actually building this, and just, it's a do-it-yourself bootstrap operation from EPA or East Menlo. There's a lot of folks that this part of the county would be well served by having this resource center. And I think North Fair Oaks is kind of central, but it would definitely reach the demographic of the folks that need the help. And the more the better. If we can get any cross pollination with the community college system, if they were willing to host some classes, if the trades, the labor council wants to host some classes, whatever. I like the synergy of bringing a lot of resources under one roof and seeing what people walk in the door with, and letting the youth and everyone know that it's possible to dream big and to make stuff happen. So that's it for my rambling comment.
So I think the answer to your first question is, excuse me, Councilmember Cirillo. Beatrice, go ahead, please.
I also support it. I think it's a really great idea. It brings in it just targets the whole idea of involvement towards like business. And I think the idea of having it be like a center lends itself to just participation of lots of different community members at all levels. So I think that's what I would really want to happen. I don't think I can, invent the wheel, because there's so many bright ideas. My thinking is, like, in my conversations with different people, I'm going to start creating just, common, just maybe knowledge of like who, what, when, where, why. And so at this point though, I think it's going to be really good. I like the idea.
Blair, Councilmember Whitney, I see your hand up. Do you have a further comment or question?
No, I just forgot to put it down. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. I think you've got an answer to that question then, Peggy. Obviously, it appears as though the council obviously supports the creation of a center. And then you talk about, would the council like to participate in the center planning? And if so, how? And I guess the question that comes to my mind is, how can we most effectively and efficiently help in the planning process? I don't know if you have any ideas, or perhaps the experience of Ernesto and Karen and Erica could contribute to that. I'm trying to figure out how we can be engaged in a way that we can make a meaningful contribution.
Well, my sense, I mean, you are community leaders. You are connected with many different aspects of North Fair Oaks. You represent many different, the business community, different neighborhoods. I think one of the things that would be helpful is to get input from you, or who should be at the table, and who we should be bringing together to talk about this. And then how do we want to get broader input from the larger community as a whole? What are the best ways to reach the business community? Is it a door-to-door survey? Is it inviting everybody in for breakfast one morning? What are the best ways to reach the people that should be designing and contributing to the concept? That would be helpful information from you all.
Mm-hmm. I see Councilmember Rodriguez. You have your hand up, Ever?
Yeah, I think that if the center is going to be considered, business and family, it may be challenging to attract both interested parties. I think that maybe if that is the idea, it could be separated a little bit, at least, during the outreach, the initial outreach, to form cohorts of interest, of specific interest, and then, the cohorts can come together, or committees, however you want to talk about them. But I was thinking about our council and, participation, and how to make it a viable thing for council members to participate in. I'm thinking that perhaps, utilizing a little bit of time out of our study sessions, that could help. And, even if it is 30 minutes or, 1 hour, that could be an option. And then if the meetings need to be on a monthly basis, we have our study sessions bi-monthly, so it would be a matter of utilizing study session 1 month and just an independent hour the next month, etc. That's just a suggestion. But there are wonderful community-based organizations that are doing great work, and I think those would be excellent resources, depending on on the committee that needs to be formed, either the business or the family, etc.
Does that sound workable for you, Peggy, to get input from the council kind of on a bi-monthly basis like that?
Sure, that would be fine. I think that would be really, really helpful. I think we could make that work very well.
Okay. The other thing we can do as well is, if you or someone on your staff would like to craft a letter addressed to the board that the council can approve next week to indicate our support for the concept, request the funding, that sort of thing, we can easily put that in the agenda. This being a study session, we can't vote on something like that tonight, but if you wanted to circulate something like that to the council, we could vote on sending that to the board next week.
Okay.
Voice.
So you want a draft letter to put on your agenda, your council agenda for next week?
For next week. You're actually on the agenda for next week already. I am
right.
Sure you knew that.
Right. And that's what we wanted to ask you. What, if any, aspects of this presentation today would you like us to share with at the council meeting? Like, we could do a condensed version. We wanted to give you the big picture so you could have a sense of what we were talking about.
I think a condensed version would be appropriate, in particular for people who might attend the regular session, but weren't here tonight, council members and the public as well. Kind of an overview of the successes in other cities, and also kind of what the plan is right now for North Fair Oaks. Okay. And then we'll circulate the letter to the other council members and get that off to the board to indicate our support.
Okay. All right. So essentially a condensed version of what we shared tonight, but focusing on the highlights then.
Let's do that. Yeah.
Okay.
What you'd like to communicate to the board, what you would like us to communicate to the board on your behalf would be great.
Okay. Okay. We will put that together. All right. Any other, sounds like we will work on the condensed PowerPoint. We'll get the letter together. I'll work with Diana on the timelines to make sure that we get this onto your agenda so you can see it in the proper time frame. And it sounds like we've got next steps going forward. So thank you all very much for your feedback. We look forward to working with you on this. The one last point I'd like to make is that we see there's real synergy between South City working with the coast side and then ultimately working with North Fair Oaks. And so I see this as really a collaborative, a coalition, if you will, of 3 organizations or 3 different groups working together and learning from each other. So I'm pleased that you were able to meet Ernesto and Erica and Karen tonight, and I'm hopeful that we'll continue the conversations together as a group.
Absolutely. There's a lot of learning we can take advantage of from the groups that have preceded us. So that's a real benefit to North Fair Oaks, I think.
Great. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation this evening. Let's see. Next and final agenda item this evening is parking enforcement. It's a discussion that we're going to have with Sergeant Patrick Taylor of the Sheriff's Department. Sergeant, I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us tonight and share some ideas and thoughts on the parking issues that we have in North Fair Oaks. It's no secret that parking in North Fair Oaks is a real challenge, particularly in the residential areas surrounding Middlefield. Probably, at least on my account, half the email that I get from residents relates to parking. The other half is probably fireworks, something like that. So, but it is a concern, and obviously the situation's only going to get worse as improvements to Middlefield Road attract new customers to the businesses along that stretch. And on top of that, we've seen several proposals, early stage stuff like grading permit applications for senior and low income housing to be built in the area around Middlefield, specifically on several parcels adjacent to where the railroad tracks cross Middlefield. The state allows these developments to have reduced on-site parking capability. So that, on top of everything else, is gonna add a lot of stress in this. So what we were thinking of tonight in terms of the discussion is kind of getting an overview or an understanding of current parking regulations, what we have in place right now, particularly in the residential areas that I mentioned. Talk a little bit about enforcement efforts, maybe the number of citations that get written for cars that have been parked illegally, cars parked, what is it, over 72 hours, something like that. And then just kind of some brainstorming ideas that might help mitigate the situation. And we'd be particularly interested in your thoughts on that. Anything that we can take from law enforcement and take to the board and suggest in a way that might help make all of our lives easier from this issue. So if you would, and we don't have to go into a lot of detail on this, but just kind of give us a sense of what the current parking regulations are in the residential area around the Middlefield business corridor, if there are any restrictions at all, and kind of what the general guidelines are, if you could.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I don't know exactly. I mean, all regulations apply, all county regulations apply also to anybody who parks in the Middlefield corridor or anywhere in the South County, the North Fair Oaks community. We do have specific regulations like street sweeping ones that are pretty significant in the North Fair Oaks community. And I have numbers broken down for those sort of citations if you wanted to hear what those numbers are.
That'd be terrific. Yeah, that'd be very interesting.
So specific to, we break them down into different sections, which we call beats. And I took the last numbers for the last 60 days that we had, and we wrote over 1,245 citations for the last 60 days in parking citations in South County. Majority of those were written in what we consider our 11 beat, and majority of the citations were written for street sweeping violations. And then we get a lot of I get a lot of phone calls personally on my desk phone about people like parking violations, like large vehicles, trailers, vehicles being parked over 72 hours. Those are probably the two biggest ones that I get most of my phone calls for, is the over 72 hours or abandoned vehicles. That seems to be the biggest complaint, or large vehicles and trailer vehicles. Street sweeping is something that we enforce regularly, and I know through the efforts from the sheriff's office and through the community down there, we've placed a lot of signs up to kind of indicate where those areas are. And if there's any other areas you guys think we need more signage, we can work with the county and Department of Public Works to make that happen. So, my email is attached, I think, in this meeting, and my phone number is also, I can get you my phone number also for my desk line. So, and I'm also here right now to answer any questions you guys have. So,
when you say 1,245 citations in South County, can you define the beat or the areas? How many of those, I guess, fall somewhere within North Fair Oaks?
Well, they all fall within North Fair Oaks.
Is that right? And that's 1,245 in how many days?
60 days.
My goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It sounds significant, I know. But the majority of those citations, like I said, just for one of our beats, the 11 beat, is
Mhm.
714 for street sweeping.
Mhm.
And I know for a lot of the members who live in that area, we have significant signage. Well, we don't. The county has significant signage down there indicating those areas. And we try to get out there early and drive the streets and let everybody kind of know that we're there. It's our parking enforcement, our community service officers who issue those citations mostly. And right now we have 2 full-time community service officers and then 2 part-time. And I know with the increase traffic and the different projects they're doing in Middlefield, we're looking at adding at least 1 or 2 more full-time CSOs or making our part-time CSOs full-time to assist us with those parking. Like you were talking about the new community centers and stuff you're putting in, we would probably need additional help from full-time staff to do that, to assist with those.
Any questions from other council members with regard to enforcement and the number of citations, that sort of thing? Councilmember Rodriguez, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, Sergeant. And I have a couple of questions. One is, how is the enforcement working on the areas around the light industrial zoning? Because I know that, those areas are particularly bad for parking abandoned vehicles, large trucks, old junkers, etc.
I know that our community service officers, so we're made aware of a lot of the issues that are presented to us in those areas, but through emails to me, to my captain or acting captain at the moment, Lieutenant Mark Myers, they're presented to us. We instruct either the teams, the individual teams. We have 4 patrol teams who go out there and assist. And we also have the 4 community service officers, and they go out there and assist in the areas that are indicated that we need to go help with enforcement, and that the community has said that they need additional help with. Once we're told of those certain areas or certain incidents, like let's just take abandoned vehicles or large trailer vehicles. For abandoned vehicles, the vehicle has to be parked for 72 hours in the same position, and it without moving, for us to cite it and then tow it. That's a huge complaint that we get a lot of times, especially in those areas you're talking about. Same with large vehicles and trailers. People are really wise to the law, and they understand that if they move the vehicle within 4 or 5 feet, that we cannot cite or tow the vehicle. So people are really wise to the different laws that are down there. We do active enforcement down there. That's why the numbers are what they are, and we do those because the community asks us to do that, and so we're trying to keep up with the demand that's in the community.
Thank you. And at some point, county was entertaining the idea of the plan of enacting some parking restrictions for large trucks. Do you know the status of that, or if it'll ever take place or anything?
I do know that's been discussed. I know, I don't know how far it made it up. I know it was on its way to go to the County Board of Supervisors, I believe, at some point, but I don't think it's made it that far yet. There are different ordinances that are involved that we can utilize, but the significant one for us is still, like I was saying, the 72-hour abatement one. That's our main, because usually when large vehicles are parked there, that's one of the main ones we go for. There's another one that's a vehicle weight requirement on the roads off of Middlefield Road or any of these side roads in North Fair Oaks. There's a weight requirement. I can at a later time, if you guys want, I can provide that code and the weight requirement. But it's basically anything that's over like a semi-trailer or larger. And we do have those rules and the violations we can cite for also.
And the reason why there has been concern about this is because many of those vehicles, large vehicles owners, don't even reside around these areas. They may live in the East Bay, though they work, they have their business, where they utilize their big trucks on this side. And so essentially, they probably, I'm guessing they probably don't have a place to park those large vehicles, or don't want to take them back and forth. And so they end up just leaving them here, and at some point there was also being entertained a possibility of implementing either a residential permit or a time limit parking zoning, to deter some of those large trucks and junkers. Do you know where that may be currently?
I don't know where that is currently. I do know like cities like Burlingame have a enforcement like such as that, where they're permitted on the vehicles, and then those vehicles are allowed to park on the streets overnight. And if you don't have one of those, the vehicle can either be towed or cited. That would be a great plan to push forward with the County Board of Supervisors, and because it would have to be a county ordinance that or a local ordinance we'd have to put into play. That would be great for that area, because that is a huge problem that we do have down there. As the vehicles are parked overnight, they're moved the next day. And also the other issue we run into with the large quantity of vehicles during the day is the business owners will move their trucks out for the day to go do their work or whatever projects they need to do, but all their employees will park in the area. And those cars then fill up all the streets, and the homeowners or residents can't get their vehicles on the streets and find parking. So those are issues that we know are occurring. We're actively trying to, enforce any rules, regulations, or vehicle codes that we can. But if you feel that's something you could definitely push towards the Board of Supervisors to enact some sort of enforcement code.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Cerrillo, Beatrice, you have a question.
I'm trying to remember. The vehicles that after the 72 hour, they're moved, but like you said, they could, they're moved around the corner. So it's kind of like you see the same vehicle going around the block. And so we know the vehicles are still on our streets. They're moved because they're now savvy of what to do. And so I think we need to be thinking about like what comes next. That's my first one. Second one, a lot of double parking. I don't know if it's just like in my area on my block on 4th Avenue, but double parking. Like I'm getting out of my car, I'm double parked inside, and it's up and down my avenue. And I have it for like since COVID, just a lot of parking around, just double parking, but not even with the person inside the car. They're like literally parking it and then going inside, doing their business or visiting or whatever. So that's just what I wanted to share.
I understand the frustration with double parking. That's something that we combated in that area in North Fair Oaks for as long as I've been with the Sheriff's Office, for over 15 years. So I know on numerous occasions when I used to work that area, we would cite vehicles for double parking because it's frustrating. Not only does it block the community members, but it blocks emergency or public safety vehicles from trying to get down the roadways. And that's something that, we take seriously. And, if you still see a significant presence of that, I'll make sure our community service officers are aware and to take enforcement, because we have multiple violations in the vehicle code for different things they could cite for. That's nothing that the county would need an ordinance for. We have other ones, vehicle codes we could use for that. According to the 72-hour abandoned vehicle, or it's called an abandoned vehicle violation, 72-hour is the requirement. We actually have just improved our whole citation system. We went to a new system in the sheriff's office called Turbo Data. And this, you may have seen the people out in the community, they have, or the different deputies or the different, say, community service officers. They have these new devices and they look like little cell phones and they're all automated. And the nice thing about those, in the past, we used to have these huge orange stickers that we would stick on cars, and you may have seen those in the community.
Right.
And we'd put the dates and times on there. We'd mark the wheels, and there's really no way of telling. I mean, we'd chalk the wheel, but if you come outside, you could erase the chalk, and then you couldn't tell. So the new thing we have is we can indicate on the new devices that we have. We can take photographs actually of the tire, where it was at, where the vehicle was at. So all of my CSOs, my community service officers and deputies, when they're putting these notices in, they can actually indicate through these new devices where the vehicle was at when they first saw it, the time and date. And then when they cite the vehicle, they can show how the vehicle hasn't moved. But they can also go back. It also helps say if one of my officers is off for 2 days, the next officer comes by, maybe he sees that vehicle is parked there, checks his system and looks inside after looking at the sticker or whatever's on the vehicle indicating that it's been tagged. They can look in the system and find out that vehicle hasn't moved or has moved according to the photographs that we can now use through our system. So it's pretty neat technology. It seems basic because it's basically just cell phones inside of another system, but it's all stored in a data system through another company in the cloud. So it's pretty neat.
You talked a little bit, Sergeant, about commercial vehicles, and we were talking about how they were parked overnight and that sort of thing. Then they move during the day, and then people who own businesses park them overnight in the neighborhood. And that's a significant number of vehicles I'm hearing. I'm thinking if there was, we talk about going to the Board of Supervisors as a way to rectify this. Could we have some kind of a weight restriction with regard to vehicles over 10,000 pounds cannot be parked overnight in this neighborhood? Is that the sort of thing that might help that, or is that just, I don't know, I'm just brainstorming here, but is that the sort of thing that might be realistic as a solution to this?
I'm pretty certain that there's already, outside of Middlefield or the major thoroughfares through the North Fair Oaks community, like Middlefield Road, I'm pretty certain there's already a weight restriction.
Okay.
Like I said, I will look that up and find the weight restriction for you. I know it's either going to be a county ordinance or it's going to be a vehicle code. There's probably both, actually. Most municipalities, we're actually the sheriff's office in that area, unincorporated, but most of us have some sort of vehicle weight restriction in those areas. And if that's the case, the vehicle's parked overnight or not on the main road, we can then cite that vehicle for being overweight. And actually, I think have the vehicle towed because it's unsafe for that roadway.
Yeah. Do you know if you're currently citing vehicles like that now?
Let me see. I know they have in the past. In the last 60 days, I can tell you if we have something cited for excessive weight. If not, I can look up and find out the last time. I don't see anything in here for excessive weight right now. It's something I can make aware of our community service officers. I'll make them aware of that.
That would be great. Yeah, it sounds like it's an issue given what people are saying. So that would be terrific if you could let them know. Councilmember Rodriguez, you have a hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that, that effort I was talking about that county was looking into to potentially set restrictions for large trucks. Yeah, I believe if I remember correctly, it would have been based in height rather than weight. And I can't remember, the footage that was being considered. But essentially anything, any vehicle going beyond that particular footage would qualify to be prohibited, I think, something like that.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any certain vehicle height restriction. Usually the most common height restriction there is I think is 13 feet 6 inches. That's usually due to semis and the trailer height. So that's usually the highest restriction that they'll do, and that's due to power lines. PG&E companies like that are aware of those restrictions. That's why their power lines are so high. Bridges, that's why you'll see them all at a certain height. I'm not aware of any other current movement on enforcing a height restriction.
Council member or Vice Chair Whitney, Blair, go ahead, please.
I'm on a different page. I was thinking back to a draft ordinance for residential permit parking. I remember when that super expensive restaurant in El Camino, Selby's, opened, and people were talking about people aren't going to pay valet parking rates. They're going to park in our neighborhood. And the county had a draft ordinance like, well, this might be a place to try out permit parking. I guess my question for the sergeant is, since that restaurant's been there, have there been a lot of parking complaints in the neighborhood just adjacent to it, such that we might want to talk about permit parking?
Well, I haven't personally. I remember when I used to work down there, and now in my current position as the headquarters administrative sergeant, I don't hear a number of complaints about that specific Selby restaurant parking. I do remember certain complaints from some of the immediate neighbors who are immediately around the restaurant who are saying some of the vehicles were parked in front of their residence, but they're parked illegally on the street at that time. I never heard of any ordinance being enacted or a permit requirement being enacted for that area.
Any more questions on that,
No.
Blair? No. County Council Fox, Tim, you have a comment or question?
I thought I could offer at least a little bit of clarification about the weight issue. There is, in fact, a county ordinance on vehicle weight, not on vehicle height, but on vehicle weight. And as the sergeant said, there's one regulation that governs maximum weight for bridges, but there also is a provision in chapter 7.48 of the county ordinance code for various weight limits on various specific roads that presumably have some kind of engineering challenge. And one of them is Fair Oaks Avenue between 9th and Marsh Road, which has a prohibition on driving or parking any commercial vehicle exceeding a gross weight of 5,000 pounds for any period of time. So it is a tool in the toolkit for roads that are uniquely vulnerable to particularly overweight vehicles, but it is not something that's done categorically. I don't see other sections of this code that deals with things on sort of a neighborhood basis. I think it deals with it more on a specific road engineering concern basis. Several county bridges have specific weight limits that are posted.
Thank you, Tim. Any other questions from council members right now? Council member Rodriguez, go ahead, Ever.
Yeah, so just one last question to the sergeant. Do you see any alternative, any advice for our council, that we could potentially explore or request to the Board of Supervisors or anyone else for that matter? I mean, we welcome any suggestions. We certainly don't want you to be overwhelmed in needing more staff to just dispense tickets, but certainly we're open to any suggestions to try to find a solution to this issue.
For a short time in my life, I lived in the city of Burlingame, and I noticed how effective the permit process was, the restricted permit process down there was. It is very effective. If that's something that they're willing to explore, these are opinions of mine and things that I've experienced in my career. Other cities do the same thing, and other municipalities do that, and it is effective for parking. And there is, in my career, in my experience, I've seen a parking issue in the area of North Fair Oaks. It's continuous, and we take it seriously. And I hope that we can continue to enforce as much as we can in that area and to help the community out, because I know it is a problem down there. But I do think parking restrictions in that sense are, and the community engaged, like if the community calls us and contacts us and lets us know what kind of things, kind of problems that we're having down there, that helps us, because sometimes we're out doing active enforcement, but when we have specific problems that are outlined for us that some community members are addressing, then that also is helpful for us, because then we have the community engaged, right? Specifically, we've had a number of streets in the West Menlo or West Selby area where they've had an RV that's massive parking on one of the streets. This is just an example. The community there is very engaged with us, and they'll notify us when the vehicle's been there. And they're so engaged that they keep a timer on this vehicle because it blocks so many roads. So, I mean, those are things that they're doing actively. The community, we like to work in partnership with the community, and we definitely need the help and assistance of the community when those things are going on. If you see vehicles that you feel are in violation of weight restrictions, or you feel are in violation of 72-hour abatements or something like that, notify us. If the vehicles are large and not from the North Fair Oaks area, or they're in violation, let us know. Vehicles can't hang over the corners. They can't park on the sidewalks. They can't block driveways. Those are all things that vehicles cannot do in those areas. And we know that people from outside the area of North Fair Oaks who are not residents do that all the time in this community. So please, reach out to your members and let them know that we're willing to work in conjunction with you to solve a lot of these problems.
And real quickly, Sergeant, as one of the things, as we've got the community festival coming up on August 14th. I know the Sheriff's Department has a booth there. In fact, the Sheriff's Department has generously funded the community festival. If you could take a note to make sure that, and I believe I've seen this flyer, I can't put my hands on it right now, but a flyer that has kind of parking ordinances and restrictions and do's and don'ts and things like that you could hand out there. And in fact, encourage residents, if you see something that doesn't correspond to what's allowable on this sheet, please give us a call. I mean, like you say, community engagement helps. It helps when people call to report violations. So I think we've got a great opportunity to reach a lot of people in the community with the festival coming up. So that would be great if you could do that.
Yeah, Lydia Ramirez, I'm sure some of you are familiar with her. She's one of our administrative helpers that helps in her office. She's fantastic.
She's organizing the festival, doing a bulk of the work on that. She's doing a super job.
Yes, and has for years. So I'll make sure she includes that packet. I'm sure she already has it. But we'll make sure she has that ready to go.
That's great. Councilmember Cerrillo, Beatriz, go ahead, please.
It's not like parking per se, but it does involve parking in that the recycling bins are out in parking spaces all the time. I find that 2, 3, 4 days before the recycling day, the bins are out. And so that further restricts the parking availability for cars on the road. So I don't know what to do for that, but I'm seeing several, and I've heard also from residents also that the recycling bins are out, the trash bins are out, and it's like, okay, what do we do?
Yeah, residents have taken to that. I've got feedback from residents that say, yeah, I'll put my recycling bin out only because if I don't, I'll have to park 6 blocks away from my house when I get home at work at night. It's gotten that bad.
And I know that we get complaints that they can't even get their cans out sometimes because parking is so dense down there. So we hear both sides of that. And so I know during those times, there's no real specific rule that I'm aware of that governs it. I know you cannot block garbage cans from being picked up. However, I think we'd have a vast majority of our citation numbers would vastly increase if we tried to enforce that on garbage pickup days.
Okay.
Justin Mates, Deputy County Executive. I see your hand up, Justin. Go ahead.
Good evening. Yeah, I think that very issue came up at the neighborhood response team meeting, I believe last month. I think there may be, I'd like to follow up. I think there might be either something from Recology or something about how long you're allowed to leave bins
I
out.
believe it is. I think it's like 48 hours before and after or something like that. It's more generous than you would think, but I believe you're correct, Justin. There is something like that. So if you could find out, that would be helpful.
Sure thing.
Yeah. One other thing, we've had a discussion about permits, things like that. I've actually had conversations with Ann Stillman about this, since I believe that setting something up and figuring out if it makes sense would fall under her jurisdiction. The sense that I get now is with the Middlefield Road construction, her department's got its hands full right now. But there was a study that was done, I believe about 7 or 8 years ago with regard to creating a permit system. So some of the spade work has been done. The concepts have been identified and that sort of thing. And my thought has been around the end of the year when Middlefield is done to sit down with her or perhaps have her come to a meeting and talk about alternatives and that sort of thing. Because again, when I get complaints from residents, quite often it's people who say, I know guys on my block who have 6 or 7 or 8 cars or something like that. And clearly that adds to the problem. And by your experience, Sergeant Taylor, you've seen how effective a permit system can be. The problem we're going to have is there are a lot of older apartment buildings in that neighborhood that were designed with not quite enough parking for the number of units they have, and so there's that issue of figuring out how many permits are available per each unit in a apartment condo like that, without being unfair to people, obviously, but clearly there's room for improvement, and I think a permit system is something that we really ought to revisit again, given that years ago some of the work has been done, so the concepts are out there that we can leverage. Are there any other comments or questions on this? Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to come talk to us this evening, Sergeant. I was quite surprised at the number of citations that the team writes with regard to parking in the area. That's 1,260 days is something else, yet the problem persists. So perhaps a little bit of outreach, the investigation of a permit system will go a long way there. And it's good to know that you've got experience with those systems and you've seen how effective they can be. So as we start developing this, I'll be sure to call on you as evidence as to the effectiveness of these things. Any other questions for the sergeant before we wrap up? Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll close out this this agenda item and prep to adjourn the meeting. Thanks to our presenters, members of the public who attended, and also the county staff, Diana, Justin, Tim, Kenny. I believe we have Emma on the line. We couldn't do this without you. Our next meeting is next Thursday, July 28th, 2022. And if I believe the agenda that I saw today, it's going to be a hybrid in-person online meeting. So if that's the case, it would be very exciting to get together in person for the first time in, I'm going to guess, almost 2.5 years. So looking forward to seeing everybody next week. And with that, I'll adjourn the meeting. Good night, everyone.